Here's what you should know about your local housing market in this week's Market Update. We went from t-shirts to winter coats in just about a matter of a day or two. Now, we've been talking about the interest rates, the jobs reports, the overall economy, but the weather has a lot of effect on consumer behavior, even more so than you might think. So it will be very interesting now that it truly feels like fall to see how that may or may not affect buyer and seller activities. Yes, we all knew we had the holidays coming up. We knew we had the fall and winter coming up. But a lot of times when the weather doesn't feel like it, consumers don't necessarily act in accordance with that. And then once we have that colder weather, people, not only from the cooler weather, have the tendency to mellow out, have the tendency to hunker down a little bit more. But it also gives them that reminder of the things to come, of that, winter weather, of the holidays that they have tying them up. So we will be keeping we have been keeping a close eye on the market, but it will be interesting to see if this change in weather has any substantial effect on the housing market activity, positive or negative. So let's get into the stats this week. This past week, we're looking at home stats in Morristown, Chatham, Madison, Harding, Morris Plains, Mendham, Chester, Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, and Randolph. This past week, we saw 43 new homes come on the market. That is a 16% decrease over the prior week. We saw the most number of houses come on the market in Morristown, with 10 homes coming on the market, but that still is a 30% decrease over the amount of homes we saw come on the market in Morristown last week. 31 of these homes were single-family houses, and 12 of these were condos or townhouses. That is a greater share even than last week of these being made up by condos or townhouses. The average list price of the homes this past week was $1,153,000. That's a 5% decrease over last week. And we saw the highest average list price in Chatham with $2,055,000. Total inventory. We currently, in these towns, have 234 homes actively on the market. That is even with last week. So we have not seen any change in the total inventory. Morristown and Morris Township has the most number of homes currently on the market, with 52 homes actively on the market. Now, when we break it down by town, we see a pretty even split between increase in inventory and decrease in inventory. However, we're not seeing any big swings either way. Increases are pretty slight, decreases are pretty slight. It does appear, though, that the towns that are further east are seeing a slight increase in inventory over last week, and the towns that are further west have seen a decrease in inventory over last week. Sold homes. We saw 22 homes sell this past week in these towns. That's a 21% decrease over last week. Average list price of these homes was $1,115,000. The average sale price was $1,154,000. So this past week, we saw homes in these towns sell for an average of 4.3% above the list price. We saw 2 towns where homes sold below the list price. That is Mendham, where homes sold for 1.8% below the list price, and Randolph, where homes sold 1.3% below the list price. Otherwise, the remaining towns, we saw home sales range from anywhere between 1.7% above the list price, that was in Morris Plains, all the way up to 10.9% above the list price in Chatham, and 10.2% above the list price in Morristown. So we're still seeing several of these towns remaining hot with pretty competitive bidding wars. But not every single town and not every single deal. So be very aware of your particular situation and be able to adjust and react appropriately, and make sure you have multiple strategies lined up if you are a buyer or a seller, so that you can be prepared for the various scenarios. Average days on market of homes sold was 27 days on the market. That is a 7% increase over the prior week. And homes that went under contract. That is the best representation of where the market currently is. We saw 35 homes go under contract this past week. That is the exact same amount that we saw go under contract last week. The average list price of the homes that went under contract has increased to $1,307,000. That's a 37% increase over last week. And then the median days on market, also we saw a slight increase over last week. That is now 29 days on market for the homes that went under contract this week. And that is an 11% increase over the prior week. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on these stats. As we see this seasonality shift, we will see how big of a factor that plays into the market. We're still seeing lower than average inventory, so I don't expect seasonality to have too great of an effect on how quickly and for how much homes are selling. But in an environment where inventory is already light and getting into a season where home sellers typically aren't as motivated to get their homes on the market, it will be very interesting to see how, I'm anticipating that the inventory will likely constrain even more. So I've got a lot of people talking to me about getting their homes ready to put on the market in the spring. Great idea. Spring is a great time to show your home in its best light. You have a lot of buyers out there, but do keep in mind, a lot of your competition is waiting until the spring as well. So it might be a good idea to contemplate potentially not waiting until the spring, get ahead of your competition, or at the very least, be prepared to get ahead of them at the early spring before they get their homes ready, more likely in mid to late spring. So thanks so much for checking in with me. If these situations apply to you, definitely reach out. I'd love to have a conversation about your particular situation. And I'll catch you guys again next week. Have a great weekend.